In 3ds Max, cameras are their own classes of objects. We can create them by going to the Command panel and up to the Create tab, over to the Camera button, and there's our standard cameras. Although it just says Standard in the drop-down, some plugins may have other kinds of cameras available. There's two kinds of cameras, a target and a free, and really they operate the same with one small difference. A target camera, as I click and drag here in my perspective view, has a camera and a target. If we pick the target and move it, the camera rotates to follow. The free camera, then, is just a camera. There's no target object attached, simply the field of view. The difference in these is that a target camera we can think of as a dollied or craned camera. A free camera, then, is a handheld camera. Really, in practice, whichever one works for you, use it. Personally, I do a lot of work with a free camera, and occasionally with a target camera. The other advantage to a target camera, if you need, is the target can be linked, parented, or otherwise constrained on an object, so the camera always follows something, such as a car going by on a road. For our purposes in our jungle, either one will work. To start out then, making cameras. In a perspective view, a target camera will create aligned with the XY plane. A free camera will align with the Z-axis aiming down at the floor. So typically what I do is press F for front, or L for left, for example, and make my free camera. That way I can place the camera above the zero line, this dark black line here in my grid, so when I spin around the camera is parallel to the floor. On the modifier panel then, we've got lens and field of view. For a camera then, and I'll show this in a top view, the smaller the lens in millimeters, the focal length, the wider the field of view. For example, a 15mm lens is practically a fisheye. That's a very, very wide field of view, and the scene will have tremendous depth. An 85mm lens has a very narrow field of view. I'll pull open my jungle scene and illustrate this. I've opened up 50 jungle camera placement start. If you like, you can work with the previous scene you have open. Right now, this is a perspective view, and we can tell looking at the viewport label in the top left. There's not a camera in the scene necessarily. What I'll do to make a camera is go into a front view, zoom out a little bit, and choose Create and Cameras. I'm going to make a free camera to start. I'll place a camera in the scene, right-clicking to stop creating cameras, and then pressing T for top view. There's my camera. Whatever the lenses you had for the last camera selected is what shows up on the new camera. Outside, I'll shoot with a 35mm lens. What affects this is the render size and the aperture. In this case, when I go to the render setup, I can see I've chosen HD 720 or HDTV at 1280 by 720 with an aperture width of 20. We may wish to change this, and real-world cameras actually have equivalents. What I'll do sometimes is change this over to custom, put in the size manually, and what this lets me do is put in the width and height and the aperture I'd like. Typically a camera may have a 36mm aperture width. I'll close this, and now if I choose, for example, a 35mm lens, my field of view is much more correct. There it is at 54. A 28mm lens has a field of view of 65 degrees. Here then in my 35, if I pull it back and press C for camera, I'm in the camera view in my scene, and it says Camera 001 in the viewport label in the top left. Shift F turns off and on the safe frame. Right now I've got the whole viewport active, and Shift F constrains it, so only what's within this inside yellow ring is what gets rendered. The camera controls are the same. I'll use the mouse wheel to pan down, and things like dolly or orbit to orbit around. Now I'm seeing this from a true camera view, and here's how those lenses look. I'll select my camera by choosing Camera 01 and select Camera. For example, I'm in a 35. A 28 makes the scene feel deeper, as if I've moved back, although I'm just changing the focal length instead of moving the camera. An 85 feels like I'm going to smash into the plants. We can play with these. Typically, I'll run a 35 outside and maybe a 28 inside, adding depth into a room. A 50 or an 85 is terrific for a close-up, where we really feel like we're deep in the jungle leaves. 135 is an intimate view. We're watching a bug on this close leaf here. And a 15 is a fisheye. We're distant in the scene and it's spreading around us, actually with considerable distortion as we can see on the sides. You can have as many cameras in the scene as you'd like to tell your story. They can have animation in the same time range or sequentially. That's really up to you depending on what's going on. For now though, I've placed my camera in and I'll get it lined up on, oh, this flower looks pretty good, right here on the third lines, which we'll talk about later.